Okay, good evening. I'm Tracy Craig. I'll be moderating the meeting tonight. I recognize quite a few faces. A couple housekeeping things first. We're first of all here tonight to discuss the sub-slab depressurization systems that are being offered to certain homeowners in Bayridge Park. And Teresa will be giving a long presentation on that, or a short presentation actually. But a couple things. There's some food here if you'd like to grab something to eat. The restrooms are to the left, and we will prop that door open if you have to go to the restroom so you can come right back in. And I think those are the only housekeeping items I have. So again, thank you for coming. We're glad you're here. As again, we're here to discuss the sub-slab depressurization systems. A couple definitions for tonight. Soil vapor extraction, we refer to that as SVE. We will try not to use acronyms tonight. And that is the larger system that will remediate or remove vapors in the subsurface that we're getting permitted right now. In the interim, the Water Board has asked for to offer sub-slab depressurization systems, that is quite a mouthful, to individual homeowners, and that's what we're here to discuss tonight. So we'll try to use those, try to say the whole terms, but just if you hear SVE, that's the larger system. If you hear SSD, that's the system that would be installed in an individual home. Okay, and when you came in, I think everybody signed in. You should have gotten some handouts. There's the presentation. There's what to expect if you get that sub-slab depressurization system, where to get more information. And then we also, of course, have the websites, and that information is in the what to expect fact sheet, I believe. And then introduction. So tonight we have, I think everybody knows Jessica Law by this time. They probably invite you over to dinner. So with the Water Board, she's the project manager, been working on this for quite some time. And then with WSP, which is Ford's consultant and used to be Wood Environmental, we have Ken Connor over here, a senior vice president. He attends all of these meetings. And then we have Daniela Harmon-Nazroff, who is the project manager. And then we have Teresa Trombello? Say it again. Teresa. And she's an engineer that will be actually giving the presentation tonight. So any questions for me? Can I have the next slide? Oh, this is also being recorded so that we can put it up on the website. So if you do ask a question, this is our agenda, of course. We'll be giving the short presentation. Teresa will be talking about the actual systems, and then we'll have Q&A. Because we're recording this, we have to make sure that we record your questions. So if you do have a question, I'd like to hand you the microphone. Make sure that you repeat the question so any viewer that's watching the video at a later date hears the question, and then we'll answer it. Okay, I think that is everything. Questions for me? No? Okay, then I will hand this over to Jessica.
All right. Hi. This slide you guys have all, I think, seen. It's just that vapor intrusion refresh. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I just want to highlight vapor intrusion is that soil vapor that's below the ground, and it's the movement of that into a building's airspace. And since we're going to be talking about sub-slab depressurization systems, I want to talk about sub-slab soil gas, and that would be the vapors directly beneath the foundation of the building. Soil gas, that is the vapors that is all of the kind of space from the ground surface down to that first encountered water table, which in Bayridge Park is about 55 feet below ground surface. So soil gas is that whole space kind of in between there. All right, so we'll start with just a remediation kind of update. So the soil vapor extraction system is what was approved and is the most effective way to clean up the site and remove those vapors from below the ground, especially within Bayridge Park there. The anticipated construction start date would be late summer due to permitting delays and system startup being early 2024. Because there's been these permitting delays that just kind of seem to keep going, and we know most of you here have had these air purifiers in your homes. They were intended for about a year so that we could move forward with this, and then there have been just delay after delay. So finally, I think I just kind of said, enough. Move forward with SSD. And that is why we are here tonight, because ultimately sub-slab depressurization is just far superior than the air purifiers. It's outside the home, it's not inside making the loud noise. And so we are going to be talking on that tonight. So an SSD system, or subslab depressurization, prevents those vapors from entering a home. They are definitely superior to the air purifiers. They consist of piping underneath the home, and there's a fan that really just redirects those vapors to above the roof line. It's safe, effective, and it is low profile. It's commonly used at sites throughout the U.S. They use it everything from, addressing vapor intrusion, including radon. So these are really common back east. Homes that have the subslab depressurization systems will no longer need the air purifying units. And I want to mention that this is not a cleanup solution. So we'll kind of touch on the soil vapor extraction system and the subslab depressurization system. So the idea right now is that we'd get the subslab depressurization system installed and operating before the soil vapor extraction system gets started. But once the soil vapor extraction system starts, they're both going to operate at the same time. The soil vapor extraction, it is a treatment system. So what that does is it is going to clean up the contamination. Remediation is going to, for a typical site, it removes the source of contamination, it prevents the contaminant plume from migrating, and it also helps control the extent and size of the plume. So the primary, because there isn't necessarily a source area here, it's just these residual soil vapors that's causing the vapor intrusion. So the idea of the soil vapor extraction is it's going to reduce the size and extent of the soil vapor plume beneath Bayridge Park. Then we have the subslab depressurization system, and that is mitigation, meaning it removes those vapors, or at least it greatly decreases. Here, it should completely remove and not allow any vapors to pass through the foundation, and it redirects it to above, through piping to above the roof line. And this prevents those vapors from coming into the home. It just stops it versus those air purifiers that treat the vapors once they get into the home. So here is a really wordy slide that I do want to spend a little bit of time on, just to distinguish between soil vapor extraction, subslab depressurization, and air purifiers. So when it comes to the coverage area, for soil vapor extraction, this is going to be that site-wide cleanup. Subslab depressurization is going to be individual home mitigation right now. And then the air purifiers, that is individual homes as well, and that treats inside the home. The purpose, for the soil vapor extraction, this is, again, the most effective way to remove and clean up vapors from below the ground surface. With the subslab depressurization system, this is going to remove and treat those chemical vapors from directly beneath the foundation of the home and address it before it enters the home. But again, this is not a cleanup solution. And then we have the air purifiers that treats the vapors once they have entered the home. The location. So I think most of you are aware the proposed location for the soil vapor extraction system is on the outside boundary of Bayridge Park along Country Club Drive. That system does operate outside of the home, and it is going to be designed to blend into the community. Subslab depressurization systems, those also operate outside the home, but here it is attached attached to the side of the building. Later on, there will be some photos that WSP that Teresa will be showing within this presentation to discuss a little more. They are low profile, and they are designed to blend in to the side of the home as well. And then those air purifiers, as you guys know, they operate within the individual homes, and they are more noticeable in the home. So noise level, when it comes to both the soil vapor extraction system and the subslab depressurization system, they are quiet. They are going to be both. The SVE system is housed within a building with soundproofing. The subslab depressurization system will have a noise dampener on and around the blower, so that way it is not there is not that noise nuisance, and it meets the city requirements of, I believe it can't exceed 50 decibels, right? Correct. So, and then the air purifiers have that noticeable humming inside the home. And when it comes to visits to the home, soil vapor extraction, there are none. That is directly dealing with the treatment compound itself. Subslab depressurization system. There's going to be routine checks outside of the home. It is proposed to be monthly. They'll come by to make sure everything is operating the way it should be, that the vapors that are being removed are being cleaned and treated. There's carbon that it will pass through, so we want to make sure that that carbon is still treating it and hasn't been used, and if it needs to be replaced, they can identify that. And then there will be the indoor air inside checks 2 times a year, and that is to make sure that there's still the appropriate vacuum below the foundation for extracting the vapors. And then for those air purifiers that has that annual filter replacement, there's still that indoor air monitoring that's occurring 2 times a year. So I'll turn it over to Teresa to talk about the SSD components.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Tamburello. It is a long name, so thank you. Thank you, Tracy. I just wanted to kind of go through a couple of the components of the SSD system, or subslab depressurization. This slide here kind of shows it 2 different ways. We have a little bit of a schematic on the left showing it along the house, and then we did another schematic on the right that's kind of trying to make it look like what it might look in Bayridge Park. So I'm kind of, if you look at it, the arrows are pointing to both drawings, so you have 2 different versions of the same thing, but I'm going to start from the bottom and kind of move up on these components. So at the very bottom, we are going to be installing a 10-foot pipe into this subslab, and that's going to be thank you. Mm-hmm. That's going to be through the bottom below the home, and then what happens is we're going to install a vent pipe, and that's going to go from the bottom of the home all the way up to the roof line. So that's what you're seeing on the edge there all the way up. And along this vent pipe, we're going to have 3 different inline components. So the first one we're going to encounter right there is the carbon treatment unit. So like Jessica had mentioned, we are going to be pulling vapors, so we want to make sure we're treating those vapors before it goes up to the roof line. So the carbon treatment is going to remove the vapors as it moves up. The second item is the blower, or a fan. It's going to be kind of a small unit, so pretty quiet. It's in a box, so it's even quieter. And this is going to be pretty much the mechanism to bring the vapors from underneath the house up to the roof line. And then we did decide, based on the pilot test, to add a noise dampener, and that's not from the blower, actually. It's actually just because there is a little bit of air movement, so we wanted to make sure that it was very quiet. So there is a noise dampener installed above the blower. So I guess kind of just to kind of look at this, the blower is going to be about 6 foot in height on the side of the building. So if that gives you kind of, I know sometimes it looks a little skewed, but yeah, and I know we gave you guys a handout, and it kind of goes through the detail on the actual installation. So I'm here afterwards, or we can ask questions on that, and that'll talk about what steps happen when we're doing this installation of the actual system components. The other item on the top right is going to be the vapor pen. So this is the one item that will be installed in the homes, and we're planning to put 2 vapor pens in the homes. And this is going to be a way for us to actually check to make sure that the system is working correctly. So we're going to just test for pressure, and we want to make sure, based on the pilot test, we know the radius of influence that's expected, but we just want to make sure we're checking it. So this gets installed similar to what we did on the pilot test house. We try to look for spots that are obviously no one can see them, so a closet or something like that. But we also want to make sure we get coverage in the living space. And it just gets, I guess there's a little bit of a coring going on, and then we hammer it in. There's a silicone, a sleeve So that prevents any air from actually leaking around it. And those get installed, and that's the things that we will come in and sample twice a year. So, yeah, I think.
So are you exposing our homes to the vapors by doing these?
No, the silicone sleeve is the one that's going to stop any vapors from coming up. And we also have a cap.
And twice a year?
Yeah.
So once those are installed, they do check them to make sure they were installed correctly. And then because it's a silicone sleeve and the way it's put in, it is airtight and is guaranteed to stay airtight. And then every 6 months when they do check, they're verifying it as well. And
I was going to say, we have been using these as a part of the indoor air sampling program, not in Bayridge Park, but in a number of other communities, including One Ford Road, since 2018. And the pins that we have installed there that we do continue to monitor still maintain, the perfect seal. We do check for vacuum to be able to hold a vacuum to make sure there's no leaking before we sample. That's part of the sampling protocol. And for the duration that we've been doing this, we have not had an issue with these. They're designed to do this and prevent vapors from getting into the home.
So I guess we'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a couple examples of SSD systems on homes. So as you can see, they can really blend in well with the outside of the home. And it seems like you might see these just kind of, I know being from the Midwest, we do have some radon issues. So you do see these for radon on several homes whenever you're kind of going around different neighborhoods. So like we mentioned, one of the other things I would like to say is that we're going to make sure that we talk to each one of you individually when we come to your homes, talk about the location of these systems, make sure obviously we're not going to be installing them near windows or anything like that. So we really want to work with you guys to figure out where you want to put it on the home and make sure it's good for everyone. So
we have a say in where it goes.
Yeah, so if you look at the handout, one of the first things we're going to do is do a site visit, and this will be a discussion with the homeowner on exactly where they would like to put it, and just kind of make sure, and in the vapor pens, so we can make sure that everyone's happy with the locations.
And Teresa, just for the video, if you would repeat the questions when you get them, that would be helpful.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So based on this map, it's saying that our area in general has contamination, so it's not a specific location in the house where there might be, you're finding more whatever coming through the soil or through the slab than other places. So if I say I don't want it here, I want it back here, are you saying, based on your testing with the canisters that you come in, you're finding that maybe that location has more vapor intrusion than?
Yeah, so the offering of the subslab depressurization is based on those indoor air testing samples, but it's not like if vapor intrusion has been identified within the home, meaning the air canisters have shown that we do find some of these chemicals, we're not placing the system like in the living room because that's where it was detected. The system will protect the entire unit. And it can be installed with some limitations, obviously with feasibility, but with your input about where it is. I imagine most of these systems are going to be installed on the backside of the homes, kind of towards the vegetated area, because there's more space there and it would be less kind of visually, prominent compared to the street side. But again, site visit to talk with each individual homeowner about where we would recommend and about how that fits kind of with what you would like.
And is this an all or nothing thing? Like, do all of us agree that we're going to do this, or is this homeowner by homeowner?
The question was, is this an all or nothing? Sorry, I forgot to repeat the question before. So the question was, is it an all or nothing? Does it have to be homeowner by homeowner or by consensus? And the approach we're using is homeowner by homeowner. So if you're on board, we can go ahead and move forward with that. If your neighbor has a little bit more hesitation, we'll work with them to hopefully get over the hesitation, but it'll be each individual decision.
The blower is electric operated.
Yeah.
Who provides the electricity?
So I should have mentioned that. I apologize. We are going to also
Okay, so
be-
I'm just going to repeat that
yeah.
question. So I think the question was, is the blower electrical, and who pays for the increase in electricity should you choose to get one of these systems installed?
Yeah, so we will actually be hooking up the blower, similar to us paying you for the APU electricity. We'll be doing the same thing. So there will be an electrician that is part of this team that comes out, and they do a conduit either from, I guess, the panel if it's in a garage and it's close by, or if we get lucky enough and there's an actual plug or an outlet that we can hook to, that's another option.
So it will be paid for by you.
Definitely.
Correct.
And is it, how long will it, is there a guarantee for so many years, or is there anything like that?
Well, we will be doing maintenance on the unit, so if it does break down or anything, that will be replaced at our cost.
For how many years? 20 years?
And-
The question
and
is for how long for this system? And the kind of quick, easy answer is when the vapor intrusion risk is no longer, then it'll be removed.
And do you have an estimate on that? Like, can you, or in your head, are you thinking?
So ideally, if the soil vapor extraction system gets operated and is addressing that the soil vapor plume below Bayridge Park, that is going to address the vapor intrusion risk. And it's going to be a combination of those two. And then there will be the subsequent sampling to confirm that that risk has been addressed.
Do you have any kind of projection when you say if it's mitigated, if the plume is mitigated, are you talking about 3 years, 5 years, 25 years, 50 years? Do you have any idea of how long this kind of thing takes?
So the
Jessica,
question
oh.
is it going to be, is it going to take to mitigate it a year, 3 years, 5 years, 25 years? If soil vapor extraction does not happen, we're looking at probably 30 plus years. That's the reality of not doing the cleanup side and why we are really advocating for the soil vapor extraction system to go in. If it works in conjunction with the soil vapor extraction, optimistically looking at, I mean, even conservatively, I would think that the vapor intrusion risk would be addressed in the next year or two, realistically. There isn't a lot of mass. And with the pilot test that was done a couple years ago, we have not seen in that area soil vapor concentrations greatly increase. It operated for 150 hours, so it wasn't enough to fully address and remove the vapor intrusion risk. But we didn't see those concentrations increase significantly, which is promising that it will be effective in addressing this vapor intrusion.
So if I may just extend, if I understand you, you're talking about putting the system in and within a year and a half, 2.5 years, 3 years, something like that, not needing it anymore. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're all anticipating. Of course, we are dealing with below ground, so there's no guarantees on this, and we have to wait for the data that gets collected to confirm its effectiveness.
So
Yeah.
last question then.
Yeah.
If you put it in and you find after 3 years that the vapor intrusion levels have decreased enough, do you come and take the system out? Okay, now I understand.
Yes, with the approval, I'll give the caveat, or the question was, after a number of years, if there is no more vapor intrusion, can the system be removed? And the answer is yes, we come and remove the system with the caveat that Jessica or someone from the water board will need to look at the data and approve that system gets removed. But that is, the plan is implement this while there's an issue. When the issue goes away, it is no longer needed.
So in a sense, this is a remediating a thing because you're extracting enough of it that it decreases? Is that the idea?
so
It's
the
not
question-
a regenerative thing because of the water flows that have been going on the preferred pathways we heard about and all that? That's not operative anymore?
The question is this a remediation system? And I'll clarify, the answer is no. So this we describe as a mitigation system, and if that was the only remedy we were applying to this community, the SSD systems may have to be on the buildings for the lifetime of the building, 30 plus years. What we are doing in addition is the soil vapor extraction, and that is the remediation. That is actually removing mass from the ground and treating it. With the subslab depressurization, really what we're doing is the vapors accumulate below the slab naturally, and we are pulling them out from below the slab so that instead of potentially going inside your house, they get treated and then discharge the clean air to the atmosphere. It's not pulling anything from the ground. It's just cleaning what gets built up under the slab. And so that's the difference between remediation, which is more like active, we're going after the contamination, versus mitigation, where we're just removing the risk from below the home.
And I'll add one extra thing, because you mentioned, the contaminated groundwater being kind of the source, part of the original problem. That's why there's also those groundwater monitoring wells within the community, because it goes, the contaminated groundwater can also volatilize and is what is creating the soil vapor plume. So one of the things we want to see is that the groundwater concentrations are decreasing. And that's part of that selected remedy for the community, is that there's the natural decrease in groundwater concentrations, that natural attenuation, coupled with the soil vapor extraction.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so then,
One more question on that. So if I choose to have this installed, but none of my neighbors do, in my building, so we're mitigating my house, are those vapors now spreading to, my neighbor here and my neighbor there?
I mean, the way the system is set up is that it's going to be pulling vapors in, so it wouldn't be migrating out. But I will say it is going to address the vapors under your house mostly. So it would be nice if all the neighbors could also get on board. But for your protection, when you install the system, that's the goal.
And to add to that, it's the extent of these subslab depressurization systems, that vacuum that's going to be pulling the blower, that it will be pulling the vapors from below the foundation, it can only reach and have an influence of about 20 to 50 feet. So if your neighbor does not participate, those vapors in theory are just going to kind of hang out and will not be influenced by your subslab depressurization.
To pull like her neighbor and the neighbor next.
Yeah, correct. Now the soil vapor extraction system, that's got a much more significant radius of influence, and it's designed that way, but it's also much deeper, and that's the point of that.
So I have a question kind of off of yours when you're talking about water movement. Is it just going to continue to wash down from higher up? Is this going to continue to be a problem?
So
Jessica, can you repeat
so
the question? Sorry to be such a pain.
No, that's good. I need the reminding. So the question is, with the groundwater, is the contamination going to kind of keep flowing through Bayridge Park? And one of the things that we are looking at is within the former facility. So 1 Ford Road is a number of groundwater wells were just installed to confirm, because there was significant cleanup that happened back in the mid 90s. And we are confirming those groundwater concentrations are also decreasing and low, and that there isn't something high and unexpected flowing still through any of the communities. And we have not seen that, especially because when we're looking at the concentrations from the wells within Bayridge Park, we are not seeing any increasing trends. And that's why, same with soil vapor, we don't want to see those concentrations over time increase, because that suggests there's something feeding that contamination. And that's why there really is so many soil vapor probes kind of throughout. And one of those telltale signs of there is mass that remains, some kind of contamination source. And we are just not seeing that here. So that is another really positive thing why I'm feeling very optimistic about the approach for your community.
So when Ford Road was built, environmental regulations were different. They had to do remediation. Is that what you're saying? So that the bulk of that should be dealt with, and that it's not just going to continue to flow down the hill and die?
Yeah, the question was when One Ford Road was built, were sort of what the environmental regulations were in order to redevelop it. And you're absolutely correct. When the facility there was decommissioned, a lot of remediation happened in the former facility footprint. So where the buildings were, there was soil excavation, there was soil vapor extraction, there was something called dual phase extraction, which also cleans up some groundwater. And once that cleanup was complete, they redeveloped it into residential. Now, we've been monitoring One Ford Road as well in recent years. And what we find is there are no remaining sources. The cleanup that was done in the 90s was very thorough. And the reason that, we're talking about remediation at Bayridge Park is because the remediation from the 90s ended at the fence line, essentially, ended at the footprint, and was not investigated just north of the former facility. So there is some residual, but there's no remaining source that's kind of bleeding out additional contamination.
And I'll add, when the investigation first started back in 2018, and we recognized that there was the need to step out all these probes, and a number of probes went into the One Ford Road community, I sat so many days with the old historical, 1995 investigation. Where were those kind of hot spots back in the day? Where did they do cleanup? What was the extent? What areas did the cleanup not cover? And let's make sure soil vapor probes are being placed there. Or when for One Ford Road, it was that monitored natural attenuation and groundwater wells, and some additional soil vapor probes were being installed. It was very strategically placed and considered to make sure that if something was missed, we would see it. And so all of those get taken into account, because since it is below ground, and we have seen this on other sites that were cleaned up back in the day where they did the cleanup, but it didn't fully address the problem. Here, the geology, the soil type below the ground was really favorable for soil vapor extraction. So that's, and the data we're collecting now supports that. Yeah.
So I bought my unit in the late 90s. I was born and raised here, so I remember the facility. I've seen everything that's been done. I've come to every meeting, and I want to say thank you. I think you've been diligent. I think you've been transparent. I've understood even my worries. You've answered my questions. You've taken my phone calls. I really appreciate it. Can I sign up? Please come to my unit.
Yes.
We appreciate that, and yes.
That's good.
Next week.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's good. That has been our goal. And I know of wanting, because
Thrilled to hear this. I've had those fans. It's not ideal. This is ideal. This
Good.
is a great plan. My brother's an engineer forever. He understands this. He says, this is beautiful work. He says, this is above and beyond. You're lucky.
good.
And I feel lucky.
Okay. I am happy to hear that. That is good. Thank you. And so then, for the scheduling of when we can get this started, I'll let you give this
Yeah.
tentative schedule. And I will say the letter has a start date of July 17th, but it is a start no later than. So if they are able to start sooner,
Tomorrow.
the water board would like to see it started sooner as well. There is a lot of planning, logistics, and things like that that may hinder some of it, but I am there with you. I want to see it done tomorrow too.
Yeah, so this is kind of the high-level schedule. As you can see, we have been preparing for this since earlier this year, and Jessica just sent us comments on the work plan. So if you guys are into GeoTracker, that work plan is on GeoTracker, and if you need that link, let me know. So we'll be providing feedback on her comments and moving forward with talking to you guys. If you're going to get an access agreement/interest form in the mail after this meeting. So that'll be a first kickoff, and that'll get you directly in contact with either me or somebody like me that will talk about when we can come out and talk to you about this installation. So like Jessica was mentioning, the goal is to be out in the field by July 17th, but obviously coordination and discussion with each individual homeowner will start before then. Yeah, and then because it is a single unit, it's going to be a rollout. So what we'll do is we'll find out who is interested. We'll talk about schedules with each person, and then we'll just try to, make it work with everyone's schedule and just continue to install the systems as people come on board.
Teresa, I have a question for you then. If somebody's here is interested, do they call you directly and set up that first meeting?
Sure.
We'll take names down. We
Okay.
do need to, the first step is going to be kind of signing of this access agreement, which we're
Yeah.
going to send out. Unfortunately, we did not bring it. We'll be sending them out next week.
By the end of next week.
So
Are you emailing them?
We can email them, yeah.
Please.
For
yeah.
sure.
And we'll be following up with folks, right? And you know, then working, yes, to see, you know, once the access agreement is signed, can we, you know, are we out there tomorrow, you know, to figure out that.
So if somebody came tonight and you're interested, then please let us know so that they can email you the access agreement. And if you have more questions, then there's a number or an email that you can call and you can talk with somebody individually about your circumstance.
And I'll add that right before the meeting got started, I was kind of chatting with Daniela and Teresa and said, hey, how about after the meeting, once you have the access available, we'll send everyone who is being offered the subslab depressurization systems a copy of the access agreement, a copy of the slide, a link to the recording of this meeting, the information sheets, all of that while you are having, because it is also a consideration, right? Some, it is cut and dry and like, yes, bring this, I'm sick of the air purifying units, and others, you're gonna wanna think on it and you've got questions and stuff, and that's perfectly fine. And so we wanna make sure you have it all in one kind of place and that contact info as well and who to reach out to get it started.
And I know you guys have all heard from Michelle, who did the initial call, so she's also a good resource if you want to ask questions. And the next page that gives you the forward information hotline, and that goes directly, Michelle will get contacted if you guys have any questions. And also, I guess, any engineering questions can come to me or Daniela or another one from our team. Did you want to do the summary?
Yeah. So then we can even go on to like more Q&A as more questions as you have this after this. So these subslab depressurization systems, they are being offered to homeowners where vapor intrusion has been identified above those screening levels. If your neighbor next door has not had their home tested and they're on the first floor and you're getting a subslab depressurization system and they say, hey, I want one, they need to first get their home sampled because we need to make sure there's vapor intrusion occurring, right? But we still, like I say at every meeting, if you haven't had your home sampled, you know, we want folks to still participate, so encourage your neighbors if they haven't. The subslab depressurization systems, they are superior to the air purifying units. They prevent those vapors from entering the home. They're quiet, they operate outside of the home, and they are low profile. They are installed and maintained at no cost to the property owner or the tenant, and they will be monitored regularly to make sure they're working right. That's the big one, is we want to make sure nothing is seeping in from the ground. They're doing baseline sampling, right as that system starts up, they're going to be doing checks, and then they'll come back and check it again. And then they will be permanently removed once that vapor intrusion risk has been identified. And that's
Okay.
kind of the big one.
Great. All right. So that is the end of our presentation. And I think what we can do is if you have questions, why don't you just raise your hand and I'll number you up. And then maybe you can just repeat the questions rather than me. I think it's a small enough group. So who has questions?
Are the screening levels for California higher than the US?
So the question is, are the screening levels higher for California than the US? And for the TCE, for trichloroethane, the main contaminant that we have, there's two different screening levels that we're using. When it comes to residential, they are the same for both long-term exposure and short-term exposure. If I recall correctly, the RSLs, which is the regional screening levels for the EPA, TCE for residential for long-term is still that 0.48, 0.46. And then that's also the numbers that we utilize. PCE for commercial properties, I think, is a little higher, or is it?
We use the most conservative screening levels that are available, and that's generally California. I think each chemical, there may be some difference, but for TCE, the primary chemical of concern, we use the most conservative as the kind of point of comparison.
But I'm pretty sure the indoor air direct exposure screening levels, because the EPA sets them at the same 1 in a million cancer risk. That's the most conservative for that long-term exposure. And that, what is kind of referred to as the point of departure, is set forth by the EPA.
Terry, and when we got a lot of wind this year, a lot of wind, as some of you know. When you attach that pipe and system, I might suggest that you would take a look at how you put that on there. Because we had a lot of wind. We lost a tree on one Ford Road and went into one of the condos, and it was a big one. So it's not a question, it's just a comment.
Well, I will make a little comment on your comment about wind. I know I was just talking to the engineering team, and we were talking about the clamps that are going to be on the house and making sure they're strong enough. And there could be an option where we put some additional anchorage towards the bottom where most of the weight is. So that has been discussed. Yeah.
Other questions? Great job. Look at that. Okay, well, thank you so much. Again, if you're interested, please let John over there at the table know. And we will be following up with an email with all of this information. We'll also stay afterwards for any questions that you may have. Okay, and please do share this with your neighbors and let them know as well, the ones that...
Tracy, one other thing I want to add. If you're not sure if you're interested but would like a one-on-one conversation, please reach out. We are happy to talk about where in your house this would be, how we could accommodate whatever you might need. You know, one-on-one attention. We're happy to kind of answer further questions. So